talking all about tact. Now, tact is one of many social virtues that Aristotle, who is like the god tier authority on virtue, one of the social virtues that he talks about. Now, I'm just going to focus on tact because I think it is the easiest one to go over, and I think it carries the most weight as far as, how we as men can use it today. So, if you've been watching the past few episodes, we've got a bit of a format here at this point. We talk about, first off, what the virtue is, second off, why you should want it, and then third off, how you get it. It's kind of hard to talk about a virtue at all if you don't know what it is. So let's get right into things. Tact is the virtue which allows you to basically be a badass party goer regardless of your personality. And to put it in more specific terms, tact is the virtue which deals with giving amusement and the proper way to do it. So it deals with both receiving and giving amusement, actually, but the proper way to do that in a social setting. A lot of the virtues we've talked about have been in, very extreme circumstances. You've got to use them, like courage, whether you're in war, you've got to make decisions and things can get crazy real fast. Or, I've talked about the scenario where a guy fuels up your wife in a bar and it's like, oh man, you've got to use a virtue there. Or like temperance when it comes to achieving big goals of yours or small goals. But this is one of the virtues that deals with an area of your life where you're relaxed. You're like at a party, you're having a good time with a bunch of people, and if you act in accord with this virtue, it's going to make you an amazing party goer or host for a multitude of reasons we're about to get into. But that's what tact is. It's the virtue which deals with giving the proper amount of amusement and receiving the proper amount of amusement, and being able to kind of go with the flow of a party or a social setting, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a party. It could be after a dodgeball game, whatever it is, hanging out with your buddies, being able to give and receive the proper amount of amusement. That's the simplest definition I could give you. So why should you want the virtue of tact? Well, in short, it makes you better at socializing with others, men and women, and most importantly, it makes you better at socializing with them in a meaningful way. And there's a huge lack of this in today's world, right? I'm trying to think. Guys hang out at maybe the gym, the bar, frat parties. Like, that's what comes to mind when you think of, okay, where are guys actually hanging out with other people? And those places, I'm not saying that you can't have great times at all those places, but, I think there is a big a lack of community. I've talked about that before. And a lot of it is because people aren't freaking good at having fun with, This virtue is supposed to make you, like, if you act in accord with it, it should make you into a more fun and enjoyable person to be around. And that's something I think as men, we should all strive for. So we're going to dive deeper into that. But this whole idea of socializing better with everybody around you in a meaningful way, it's good for your soul. It's good for building self-esteem. It's good for making great connections with people. And so it's a very valuable virtue to actually try and adhere to. So, okay, before we start talking about how you get it, I want to go over the three men that Aristotle talks about in regard to this virtue. Now, if you've watched past episodes, this three-man format that he gives you is super helpful when it comes to telling you where you're at, in regard to the virtue. I guess one of the best ways I can explain this is, let's say you have a target weight you want to hit for some reason, which I don't think that's necessarily how you should do fitness, but that is my own. I digress. I'm not going to talk about that. But when it comes to, like, say you have a specific weight you wish to hit. So you're like, man, I really want to get to 195, okay? So you step on the scale, and you look down, and the scale comes back, and it says, you're 208. You're like, you look at that, and you're like, damn. Okay, I gotta change some stuff up. If I'm wanting to hit 195, I gotta drop a couple pounds, and I'm gonna have to make some choices that get me there. And so, or maybe you're trying to bulk up and you're trying to hit 180, and you're a 160 pound guy, and whatever, you get on the scale and it's reading like 168, and you're like, damn it, okay, I gotta eat more. It tells you where you're at. The scale just tells you where are you currently, so that you in relation to your goal. So if your goal is 180 as a 160 pound guy, well, okay, you know what you need to do. If your goal is 195 as a 208 pound guy, well, you know what you got to do. Okay, it gives you a reference point, and that's what this three-man method that Aristotle goes over with each virtue gives you. It's like, okay, where am I? Where do I need to adjust? How do I actually hit this idea of being a tactful man, or a virtue, a courageous man, or a temperate man? It helps with all those things. So I'm going to go over the three men that Aristotle talks about in regards to tact, and I hope that it helps you see where you're at. And I'm once again, I try and make this very clear in this podcast. I am not perfect at any of these virtues, but I'm working at becoming better. And I hope that if you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, that you're of the same mind. You want to become better. So, okay, here are the three men that Aristotle talks about in regard to the virtue of tact. The first is the buffoon. Not a baboon, by the way. A buffoon, okay? And that's like, you've probably heard of the word buffoon, but it's like kind of a crazy idiot, that's out there doing stupid stuff. And the buffoon tries to give too much amusement. He does super outlandish things to get people's attention and like to get a rise out of people. And the weird thing is, it often works. People do normally like laugh at the crazy shit that he does. But a lot of times, in my experience, they're laughing from a sense of pity, right? It's like, this guy puts so much of himself out there on the line that if I don't laugh, I'm going to be seen as a douchebag, so I'm going to laugh. But it's not laughing so much because what he's doing is crazy funny or enjoyable. It's, man, you really risked a lot there. Like, why did you go that hard in that department? You could probably scale it back a little bit. So the buffoon does crazy stuff to get a rise out of people and to give that amusement to people. He wants to be accepted by everyone, but the problem is it leads you to be seen as an extreme dude, and you don't really want that at a party. Like, you're the guy that's going to jump on the chandelier or smash a table. It's like, dude, like chill. We don't need that. That's a little too far just so you can get a laugh out of people. Another great example is if you've ever watched the Jackass series. Like, there's definitely some funny stuff in those movies, but all those guys in that series, I don't respect them. And why? It's because they went so far to get a rise out of people that they actually ended up hurting their own integrity, in my eyes, and I think in a lot of other people's eyes. Like, I don't really respect them. I think they've done some crazy stuff that is just too wild to not be like, wow, that is insane. But at the same time, I think that the buffoon draws respect away from himself, and I don't think any man really wants that. And another thing about the buffoon is that he will get mad if other people are garnering attention, right? So somebody makes a joke and it just kills. Like, it's hilarious, right? Everybody's like laughing at it. He might laugh along, but in the back of his mind, he's thinking, he's got this like jealous mentality, like, why are they laughing at his joke and not mine? So that's the buffoon. You don't want to be the buffoon. Yeah, so that's what the buffoon is. Steer clear of that. Now, let's talk about the other extreme when it comes to this virtue of tact, and that's the boorish man. So the boorish man, how's the best way to describe this? He's basically Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, like just always sullen and sad and a pessimist, and he brings down the mood of the party so hard. It's terrible. He's like that guy in the corner with his arms crossed, looking at the floor, mumbling about how he didn't get his way. What's a good example? Okay, let's say you went to your friend's house, and it's a small group gathering of a couple of your friends, and you guys knew it was a game night. Like, you guys had already talked about, this is a game night. Hey, come over, eat dinner at our house. We're going to have a game night. And the boorish man comes into it thinking, oh, Monopoly. For sure, we are playing Monopoly. And he suggests it, and everyone's like, hey, great game, but it takes 3.5 hours. Let's play something, let's play Clue, because that's like something, everybody can stay engaged in. It's fun. People a lot of times aren't as much of a dick during that game. Like, man, Monopoly, I'm cutthroat. Same thing with Risk. Like, I can be a jackass for sure when we're playing those games, but that's why I really choose to play those with my guy buddies who can take it, because I don't want to really offend people in that regard. I'm ranting about board games now. I got to get off that train. But, the boorish man is like pissed the entire time. And so even if he does play Clue with the people, he at the back of his mind and with his actions and his body language, he's going to be telling everyone there, I'm really upset you didn't choose the game that I wanted to play. That's the boorish man. And he's just a douchebag. Like, don't be that guy. I'm sure everybody has experienced that person where they don't get their way, so they get so mad and they just bring down the whole mood of the party and they make it all about them. It's a very selfish position to have, and nobody likes that in a man. Okay, so that's why you should steer clear of being the boorish man. And then finally, let's talk about the tactful man. So first and foremost, the tactful man is like when you're thinking of your guest list, it's like, damn, probably the first 4 people that you list for your guest list are probably relatively tactful people, because they just elevate the whole mood of a party and they make it super fun. And that's because they know the proper amount of amusement to give and the proper amount of amusement to receive. And there's a great back and forth that they can bring to a party. They almost bring like simultaneously a lightness to the party, like a relaxed nature to the party, but also this sense that, there's also depth here. We're not just drinking beer to drink beer. Like, I can drink beer with this person and have a great conversation and really feel fulfilled and get this great sense of catharsis from them. And we could talk about deep subjects. We could talk about light subjects. We could, just all across the board, they're great to have at a party because they make others laugh, but they don't talk over other people. They've got this very beneficial attitude towards everyone. They just want everybody to have a great time, and they're able to go with the flow. So he may have been the guy that came to the party and was like, okay, I thought we played Monopoly, but no worries, let's play Clue. And he makes that mental choice to say, yeah, I'm going to choose to have a good time here, because I could choose to sulk in my corner and cry like a little baby, but I'm not going to. I'm going to, for the sake of everyone else at the party, I'm going to try and have a good time, because that's what I'm here for. I got invited here by the host. I'm supposed to be a good guest. And so the tactful man, he's just all around amazing to have at a party. And so, yeah, try and be the tactful man. I mean, I'm definitely not perfect at this, but it's really worth striving for, being this guy that everybody can talk to and relate to. And that doesn't mean, everyone's got different personalities. Don't get me wrong. Some people are quieter than others. Some people are loud and boisterous. And that's not a bad thing. That may just be your personality. But learn how to work with your personality so that you can, when the time comes, bring out a little bit of that. Just like, hey, I'm here to have a good time. Like, there are people at parties that I've gone to, where they're quiet, but you can also tell they're having a good time and they just elevate the mood. Like, maybe they're not the most talkative person, but you can still have a great conversation with them if you choose to engage in it. Some people at parties like will actively seek out a conversation. Other people don't. Sometimes you have to go to them, and then you end up having a great conversation. And so this idea of like, oh, well, my personality is going to get in the way of me being a tactful man. No, that's not true. That's not true. You get to make choices. That's the whole point of this podcast, people. You get to make choices that can make you into a better party guest or a better socializer. Or you can make choices that will lead you away from that. So make choices to be the tactful man and be great in those social circumstances. So we have talked about what tact is. We have talked about why you should want it. We've talked about the 3 men that Aristotle talks about in regard to tact. Now let's talk about how you get it. So, like every other virtue that I've talked about, it requires repetition. It's not going to happen overnight. Most change in a man's life doesn't happen overnight. Okay, it's so rare. Like, people don't have Facebook success stories all the time. It's a slow progression. And so, like every other virtue, it requires repetition. Doing good time and time again so that one day it becomes second nature and natural. But how do you do it? You pause before you act. This is really the key, in my opinion, to actually becoming tactful. Take a pause before you do something in a social setting, right? So it's like, maybe you've got a sex joke you want to make, right? Because you think it's really funny and your guy buddies would really appreciate it. But before you make that joke in a social setting, you definitely check the room and you make sure, okay, this joke would be super inappropriate if there were ladies around. I'm not going to make this joke. It would make, I would be seen as a lesser person if I were to do that. So I'm I'm not going to do that. Okay, I'm going to wait for the proper opportune moment for that. It may be taking a pause before your first reaction to that whole game scenario. It's like, okay, Monopoly didn't get chosen. I was kind of looking forward to playing that tonight, but okay, how should I react? And then you think about how you should react, and then you react the right way. A lot of times, let's be honest, guys. I mean, I know this for myself. A lot of times, my first reaction is not the best reaction. It's just the reaction, So having that pause, taking that time can be super helpful when it comes to making decisions in a social setting that will contribute to the happiness of everyone around and the joy of everyone around, the lightness of the atmosphere, the fun nature of the party. So take a second to pause. I was actually at one of my cousin's bachelor parties recently. It was a great time, and they got all the married men around, and they sat them down, and they were giving advice. And one of the guys there, he gave a piece of advice I'll share with you because I thought it was great. He was like, in the years that I've been married to my wife, one of the things I've really become a pro at is the power of huh. And I was like, power of huh? What the hell is this guy talking about? And he's like, when my wife comes to me with something and she's angry or she's upset, before I react, I go, huh. And I give myself that half second to think. And I was like, man, that's so great. It's like in anything in life, when there's a big decision that needs to be made relatively fast, how are you going to react? Just go, huh, and maybe you don't do it audibly, but you just take a half second pause before your first reaction. Because, anyone anybody that you love that at different times has offended you, sometimes they come to you with something and they're all heated and everything. And your first reaction could be, oh, I'm going to get heated back. I'm going to get really pissed off real fast too because I'm defensive and like they're attacking me. But a lot of times that's not the best reaction. A lot of times the best reaction is to go, take that little power of huh, like the guy said. I love that. And he goes, huh. And in your head, you're thinking, how should I react to this? Take a little deep breath and then react. And so it's the same thing in a social setting. Is like your first reaction might not always be the best. So just give yourself a half second. Don't be like standing there staring off into space for, 10 seconds and not responding to things. But just be proactive about thinking, what is the next right move in this circumstance. And that really applies to every virtue. But I think with tact, just questioning real fast. Like, oh, if I make this joke, is it going to go over in a really bad way? Should I not make this joke because it might be taken the wrong way? And sometimes you take that risk, sometimes you don't. But the tactful man is thinking about these things and being proactive. No one's perfect at a party. I mean, certainly not. But you can work at becoming the tactful man and thinking about things before you do them. So that is the virtue of tact. Like I said, I got to work on this too. But I hope this helped you all to kind of, maybe see some options as to how you should act in social settings. And it makes you have a badass time, next time you go to a party. I think we are missing so much fun today, like meaningful fun. We do stuff that we say is fun, but it never creates lasting memories. It never creates this sense of peace at the end of things. Like a great party, if you've ever gone to a great party and you leave and, you're on your drive home and you kind of take this big exhale and you're like, man, that was a really solid time. I had so many great conversations with people and I learned so many new things about people, interesting things. And, it's also like a valuable part of this too, where a lot of times if you're able to be the tactful man, people want to be around you and you can make amazing connections. Like, oh, I need a plumber. I just learned that John's a plumber. So, maybe if we meet a couple more times, we get to know each other better, I could ask him for a favor and I could return a favor, in return. And so there's a connection aspect to this that's valuable as well. But yeah, that's tact. I hope you enjoyed.